let's continue our discussion of Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. And for the race winner, he was pretty happy. Chris Buescher says winning is just the best.
Winning fixes everything. Fixes the points talk. It fixes morale. It fixes bad weekends before. Everything can be changed by winning. So it's awesome that we are in the playoffs. You know, that was part of our goal at the beginning of this season. As RFK, we talked about winning races, making the playoffs, and being able to be a contender in the playoffs.
Alexis, that checks a lot of boxes with the W.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, that's the goal every weekend, right? Is to get your car in a victory lane, and everything else is supposed to just fall in line after that. If you have a winning team and a winning car, you make the playoffs and you get into the playoffs and you win and you potentially have the opportunity to go for the championship. Like, everything comes back to winning. He mentioned there that winning fixes everything. Yeah. Did you feel that, when you
listen? How many, and Duggan, we've been around a little bit longer than 11 years. I will say that, Alex. But how many times have we had the conversation, read the conversation, been a part of the conversation for me that, he's going to get fired. He hadn't done anything. Crew chief's going to get fired. They hadn't done anything. Sponsors leaving. They hadn't done anything. They win. They get a new 3-year deal.
Sure.
That's how. Yeah. So he's exactly right. Winning solves all the problems. And the races that behind Chris, they would look at and say, this is why we lost. And now they refer to it as this is why we didn't win. They use the word win more. So it is a huge plus.
I don't know that there's a sport on the planet that you benefit as much from a single victory. You go 1-16 in the NFL, and you're tossed. But you win 1 out of 36 in the Cup Series, Kyle, and people are saying, well, extend his contract, give him more money. And I've heard people refer to Austin Cindric as a superstar.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I'm not sure there are superstars in this sport anymore, but that's I digress, and that's for another conversation. I think there's stars. I'm not sure about superstars, but when you look at that, you gotta know that when you win, and we always looked at it differently, but this is how a lot of people are. How when you start talking to other sports, is there's 36 people in the race, so when you win, it's you beat 36 other teams. You didn't just beat the guy that was across the court from you, the other team on the back. It's not a 1-on-1. It's a 1-on-35. You know what I mean? It's a 1-on-35. So it means so much more to do that.
Well, I was just, when you think about that and you think about the numbers game that it is, when you have 2 baseball teams playing against each other, or two football teams or 2 soccer teams or whatever it is in stick and ball sports, you as a team have a 50-50 percentage of winning. That is not the case when you're racing, 30 plus other cars every single Sunday. So I think that's why, the dynamic is a little bit different there when you talk about winning.
Is. Team owner Brad Keselowski led 102 laps at Richmond, didn't win. So at the end of the day, he goes, I'm happy, but I'm not happy.
Bristol honestly stung a lot more than this did because, it was out of our control where we blew a tire. And here I think there were some things that were in my control and in our control as a team that I wasn't flawless. So there's a little bit of work to do there on my end. So I don't think it stings so much the way Bristol did, but in both cases, we had 2 good cars, and we were able to strike with the 17 car, and that's something to be proud of.
Alexis, aside from a goofy pit stop, Brad Keselowski ran a great race, but I don't know matched even up if he was going to beat his teammate.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, it's quite clear how Chris Buescher got to the lead, and that was because of the fact that Brad got into his pit box a little wrong, made his pit stop go longer than it should have, and Chris just passed him under green flag pit stops. But I think you're right. If things would have gone the way they were going and he would have had a flawless pit stop, I think he would have passed him on the racetrack.
I think you're absolutely right. And, of course, Brad goes on to say that it's pretty nice that both teams look like they're headed to the playoffs.
I don't know if I have an answer for what it means other than we get to stay in business, which is always good, right? It's a good boost of confidence for us that we're doing the right things for me personally, but beyond me, just the people that work there every day.
Kyle, I think maybe the bigger question, and we've talked a lot about who gets in, who gets that 16th spot. Can this combo of Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski, and it looks like Keselowski will get in. He's got a big cushion, and it looks like obviously Chris Buescher is in. Can they make any noise at all once we get post Daytona and get into playoff time?
That's a really good question. I think Chris can. I think he can make a little noise.
Really?
Yeah, I think he can make a little noise. Yeah, listen, we got to go back to Sonoma and the road courses. Chris he's an excellent road course racer, and that's where he's kept himself up. Brad obviously can drive anywhere, win anywhere, anytime. But we heard Brad say, he made a couple of mistakes. You make a couple of mistakes by not running up front. You get used to running up front. It's a learned behavior. Pitting under pressure, understanding what's going on in the first 3 or 4 on the sharp end of the stick. I think that's where they fall a little bit short as a team. They don't run there consistently enough to understand the game that's played up there all the time. So, listen, I give him a little bit more. I give Chris especially. I give him a little bit more than I give some of. If we had to rank others, I would rank 4 or 5 behind him right now as far as moving on to the round of 12 or moving on to the round of 8.
Alexis, it looks obvious that Chris Buescher had the best car. Brad Keselowski was good. 23-11 looked good in the first part of the race. But it seemed that this race was as much decided by miscues and mistakes and fumbles at the 1-yard line as it was by performance on the track at Richmond.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, you see that a lot when you have a race like we saw at Richmond where you have only one natural caution and you have so many pit cycles happen under green. I mean, that's when the pressure is on. That's when, you really have to perform. And even the slightest, tiniest mistake can mean so much. I mean, I think when Brad Keselowski came in to his pit box wrong and Chris Buescher passed him, I think he gained like a whole straightaway on him in that one exchange. And it's like, okay, well, it's really hard to get that back. But you also had Bubba Wallace, who had a bad pit stop. He was really good at the beginning of the race. His team had a really slow stop. You had some commitment line violations from Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick. So yeah, you're right. There was a lot of fumbling on the 1-yard line, as you mentioned.
Kyle, is that just a magnification of the product of the type of racing that we had at Richmond?
Yes. Yes, and I think it magnifies also the quality and the level of play there is. That you've got to be perfect all the time. This is not a game like they used to play, where you'd have a flat tire, you come in, you get a couple laps down, you make it up, and next thing you know, you're a Coca-Cola 600 winner. Yeah, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just not that way anymore. You make a mistake, and it's going to relegate you to the tail end of that line, to whatever that is. You might make up a few places, and we saw Eric Almirola have a tremendous drive back up through there after he had a commitment cone violation. But, Kevin Harvick said it last week. They were running pretty good, had a bad pit stop last week. There's a couple of times we've seen where they had a top 4 or top 5, but it relegates you to a 12th or 13th because those guys in front of you, they might not have been faster than you, but they were perfect all day long.
And when you don't have cautions and you get to catch up to the field, it's magnified. By the way, a quick question, finish up this segment here. 13th, Chase Elliott. 18th, Alex Bowman. 19th, Kyle Larson. 21st, William Byron. Alexis, Kyle, that's where Hendrick Motorsports finished. That's not where the Empire is supposed to run.
Yeah, a little bit out to lunch there. Yeah. There wasn't a lot to be shown from the HMS crew this past weekend. But to be fair, half of them, it's just whatever. Because you've got Kyle Larson, you've got William Byron that are already in the playoffs. Now, when you talk about Alex Bowman and you talk about Chase Elliott, that's a huge opportunity missed. I mean, there's only 4 races left in this regular season, and every single week that goes by, it is getting less and less likely that NASCAR's most popular driver is going to be a part of it.
Yeah, Alex Bowman, this was a place I felt like if they were going to show something, they were going to show something. They had a pretty decent run last week at Pocono, got in that late incident, but had a decent run. It's always funny to me how we and this year it's playing out this way. We go to the racetrack, Larson, Byron, and Bowman run good, and Chase is the last car. Yesterday, Chase was the best Hendrick car, and the other 3 run bad. So it just the way fortunes sway over there. Chase had a few bright spots. He probably had 25 or 30 good laps out of the 400 they run up there, if you look at it, and. So
doesn't he do better than that? I think
he's got to do better than that. Even though he made up points, but he made up points because of what we were just talking about. Other guys made mistakes and took themselves out and opened up a spot in front of them.